Loud and clear, Mark.
Okay, thank you. Hey, well, sometimes when you come back from these, you don't know if you're totally connected. So on the consent calendar issues, I know yesterday morning that they weren't on, and I think they were on approximately like noon. I don't know the whole story behind it, but I had them in the afternoon for review. I'm sure there's a ton of questions we do have. Well, I guess if we take the time to get briefed on each one, it's just like pulling them off. So we've got in our consent calendar, we have the informational ones, and you guys know the background on that. That's just for our FYI. Then we have our actionable ones that are actionable items. That's also on our consent calendar. So let's just take care of business here, I guess. I'll start off with Member Hanson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to pull, it's number 2 on the agreements for board approval. That's the Utah Restaurant Association's foundation.
Okay. Member Earl.
Yeah, I'm just not voting for any of these. The only reason why is I have a number of questions on all. It would be difficult to adequately read through the documentation and provide adequate questions. So at this point, that's where I'm standing, at least on this. And then I do have a question on the information ones. Is it because I realized that we'd only post those that change the contract with an additional $100,000? So these are listed here because there's a change to the contract in some regard. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, no, not quite. Not just
okay.
Contract. The informational is all part, and we started this years ago for full transparency. And maybe Scott Jones could speak better to me about, or better than I can, on the informational pieces. But any contract or amendment, any contracts at all that have a value over $100,000 goes before the full board for approval. Under 100,000 has staff approval. And so there's amendments, there's continuation, there's contracts, there's people that are contracted as contracted employees. And that, did I miss that, Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones? Do you want to add to that?
Chair, Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. No, that's accurate. I just maybe add that it's in your board bylaws that, and you spoke to this, and Board Member Earl spoke to this as well. So the distinguishing factor is that any contract that's over $100,000 has to be approved by the board before myself or Superintendent Dixon or anybody can sign it. So that's why you have the contracts and agreements for approval agenda item. And then with that dollar threshold, then to your point, item 4.2 is an information item because we do want to ensure that we get any and all contracts and agreements in front of the board for review that are below that $100,000 threshold that we can sign, I can sign, or Superintendent Dixon can sign, or Deputy Superintendent Norman can sign, to ensure that you're all seeing those agreements and contracts below that dollar threshold. So then, subsequently, when there's amendments to particular contracts, we ensure that, and depending on the dollar amounts associated with the amendments, we follow this same process and in support of that particular policy within your bylaws. Did I answer your question, or perhaps augment or support your statements and Board Member Earl's statements, Chair Huntsman?
Well, let me ask Board Member Earl, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I guess my follow-up is, although we didn't change the money amount on Panorama, we did change the scope of the work. So we're now including adult social emotional learning that we're going to be measuring, and I do have an issue with that. So I guess it is informational, and I guess according to our policy, we don't vote on that, but I just, just in a quick glance, because I haven't been able to go through all those, if that's the change, and that's what I guess that's what I'm asking. It looks like that's the amendment to this particular item. And maybe Zach's got his hand up. Maybe he has a comment.
Zach Christensen, your hands raised.
Yes, Chair. If I may, Zach Christensen, Director of Purchasing and Contracts. The amendment with Panorama, we had already included information that these surveys were included on the cooperative segment of the contract. So if an LEA wanted to purchase, these surveys on their own, it was already under the contract where they would not have to do a separate solicitation. This is not part of the contract that the board is paying for. This is strictly part of the cooperative contract to clarify that it is something that the LEAs can purchase directly, and to clarify what those costs would be if they were to purchase that on their own.
Okay, that's helpful. So but it expands the adult social emotional learning component. Is that accurate?
I can get Aaron to help clarify.
That's okay.
But I do not believe that it expands it. It clarifies that it was already listed in the contract, but it clarifies what is, what that is, and the cost associated that for LEAs.
Okay, I might see if I can get in touch with Aaron and get some further information on that. Thank you.
Board Member Moss.
Might I ask a question about one item, or do I need to pull it or request pulling to ask the question?
To follow our normal procedure in that, just pull it and then ask a question on that if it's an.
All right, I'd like to pull the West Ed contract just to ask a couple of questions.
What number is that? What number would that be? That's number.
It's the final item, but I'm not sure if it's got a number.
Okay,
That would be contract number 4.
got it. Thank you. I keep wanting to say 5, but I want to be accurate. So we're pulling item number 2 and number 5. Am I seeing any other hands raised? So Vice Chair's help me out, because my screen is not allowing me to do that again. I don't know what's happening. I can't see everybody's hands raised. Member Klein's hand is raised.
I'd like to pull the Carrosoft technology one. I think what number is that? I'm not sure. It's one of the first or second.
Item number 1.
Thank you.
Member Earl, your hand's raised.
Yeah, if we're going to proceed to vote on these, or at least if others are, at least I would be interested in, even the knowledge works, which is number 2, getting some detailed information about it. So thank you, if you can pull that as well.
So we've pulled contract number 2 and 4.
And 1.
And 1 is Klein. So I've got 2 Earl, Board Member Earl. So just so you know what order these are in. And number 4 is
Board Member Moss.
and number 1 is Klein.
Yes.
Mark, and then also, if you'll recall, number 2, which is the Utah Restaurants Association, that was pulled earlier. I think we've pulled all of those 4 contracts.
Well, that's Is that number 1 or number 2? The restaurant.
I'm looking at the summary, the agreements for board approval page in the backup, and I think that we pulled all 4. The Restaurants Association one is number 2 on that summary. They are numbered differently when you pull up the contracts individually.
Okay. One was pulled by, here we go again.
Board Member Klein,
Number 2.
Board
is
Member Earl,
Number 3.
I think was that Board Member Hanson that pulled that?
Yeah.
I pulled number 2, and I think board member Earl pulled number 3, and board member Moss
did
pulled
4.
number 4.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes.
Might we consider, if these don't have to be done today, that we bring them back in a couple of weeks at our next board meeting?
Thank you. That's going to be my next question.
Thank you,
Is
Chair.
everything critical, and we can bring these back in our next meeting next week? Zach Christensen? Because I think it's important that everyone gets a chance to vet these, and
Yes.
can these wait a week? Members,
Deputy Superintendent Jones has his hand raised. I believe that the Utah Restaurant Association was going to be discussed during executive session later today. That's what Brian had indicated was the plan. I know that IT has requested the Carrosoft, and I know that there's a little bit of time sensitivity. I'll follow up with them to see if that delay would cause any kind of issue with them.
okay,
That server in infrastructure, Jared put in the chat.
Yes.
okay. Deputy Superintendent Jones?
Thanks, Chair Huntsman. So yes, number 1 is strictly just the scope of number 1 is for a server upgrade. And due to all of the cybersecurity concerns we have out there, it's really imperative that we get these servers to standard, right, or upgraded. So beyond that, there's nothing beyond that scope for contract number 1. It's just that it's a refresh for our server infrastructure. So I hope that helps with item number or contract number 1.
Well, just to allow everyone to have a chance to get down into the details, when I'm here, I don't think 1 week will make a difference unless it's a really big SOS. So I think we'll put these on our next agenda. Next week. Zach, Christensen, your hand is raised.
Yes, sir. Just a further point of clarification on the Carrosoft. The quote that we have from the vendor does expire tomorrow, which is another reason why it does have that time sensitivity. If we do not pass it, then we'll start the process again to get another quote, and that may change the price on that.
And that's on number 2. Well, still, it's important that the board has an opportunity to review these early and ask questions and get into it. And on that, Zach, if you could expedite a quote or whatever and try to get an extension on that quote to our next board meeting, that might be what best serves us. Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones.
Chair, thanks. I just want to make sure that that we're all that we all understand that the board had approved the backups for these items, for items number 1, 4.1, and 4.2 could go in or would be submitted to the board secretary, to now Sybil, it used to be Lorraine, by 5 p.m. on the Tuesday before the board meeting. They came in a little bit after 5 p.m. That's true, but then were posted by Wednesday morning. So I just maybe I understand, the need to, have time to review these. But that is a process that the board had put into place specific to this agenda item, was to allow right up to that 5 p.m. on Tuesday, because of all the dynamics that are associated with our contracts, and trying to put it as close as possible to your Thursday meeting to try to get contracts addressed timely, or is included as much as possible in there. I just want to just remind everybody of that particular process that's been in place for years now. In addition to the $100,000 threshold, is that they're due by 5 p.m. The backups are due by 5 p.m. to 4.1 and 4.2 to the board secretary the Tuesday before your board meeting.
But one of the challenges here was that they weren't always out of sight for that review. So maybe I'm just gonna, well, they are on our agenda item. With that said, let's see if any of them can move forward. Let's take number 1, Member Klein. Do you have questions or comments? Because nothing on the consent calendar is going to get approved now. So we can't take a motion.
Okay. So are you asking if I have questions about Carousel, or just, I just wanted to say I refreshed umpteen times yesterday all throughout the day, and I could never get any of the business cases to come up, anything on the consent calendar for that matter. So
with and that's being recognized by the board members. So on item 1, and I'm sure it's shared by others, Member Belknap or Vice Chair Belknap.
Yes, Chair, I just would like us to consider reviewing this number 1, either now or ask all our questions, and then being able to bring it up for a vote with the importance of it for protection of security. If it was something else, I would say postponing 1 week probably doesn't matter.
So that's what I'm asking. Right now, we're talking about the item number 1. Do people have any questions or concerns? And somebody could make a motion too, but it's what we do when we pull a consent calendar, and we either make a statement or ask questions or clarifying questions. And if there isn't a vote to move it forward, then it will come back. So Member Earl.
Yeah, my question is this: I see a lot of things listed on this particular contract items, and where this particular organization doing just a quick search is kind of an open platform organization. I'm wondering about the data collection. I understand that we make people sign data privacy things, but is that the case here? And what is this all for security reasons? With an open data platform, there's concerns there that we're opening a door for other organizations to maybe access. I don't know if there's anybody that has that information or that.
Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones, your hand's raised. Can you respond to that, or is there some staff?
Yeah, Director Felt can address that or answer that question, sir.
Okay, Director Felt.
Jared Felt, USB EIT Director. Carrosoft is just a vendor. Nutanix is the product that we're purchasing, and it's part of our server infrastructure that we have been using already. This is a tech refresh for our current infrastructure. If we don't do this now, we may have to purchase an additional $70,000 worth of coverage on our old infrastructure until we get this in place. So it's just a vendor that is on state contract that we purchased through. So
it is just product we're buying for us to use. Is that
correct?
It's not a service.
No, it's a hardware server infrastructure virtual environment that we host our software applications that we develop in-house on.
Okay, not accessible by other outside organizations for data?
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you.
Member Hart,
I'd like to make a motion.
okay,
I move that we approve the contract for the Carousel following the quote provided.
that'd be 4.1. Can I call up 4.1 on our consent calendar without objection? Is there a second? You,
Second.
I'd like to speak to my motion.
yes, speak to the motion.
This is hardware. This is just another piece of the widget that we use to keep our data safe and keep our systems running. This isn't a product that touches the student, nor does it touch users, so to speak. It's not a software, it's hardware. So I see the urgency, I see the necessity, and while I would have, obviously we need to review those. In this particular case, I think it's prudent to move forward with this quickly.
Okay. Thank you. Discussion? Molly, your hand's still raised.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Fine. So the motion before the board is to approve 4.1 of our consent, item 4.1 from our consent calendar. All those in, let's see, board members at this time, I was going to call it out, but board members at this time, please vote. The voting is complete with 2 no votes. Member Earl and Member Klein. Is that how you see it, Vice Chairs?
Correct?
Then
Yes.
motion passes. Okay, the other item that was pulled was 4.2. And that was Member Earl. Did you want to speak any more to 4.2?
That one's me, Chair.
I got you on number 3?
Well, I
Apologize. Member
would
Hanson.
prefer to speak about this one. I just wondered, in light of the ongoing issues with the Utah Restaurant Association and the ProStart program, I understand that we have an ongoing contract and that we're re-upping that and expanding the scope to keep that going. But I think it's important to have staff explain what precautions and changes were inserted into this contract to avoid the kind of problems that we've experienced in the past. So could we ask staff, Chair, through you, to explain that to us so that the board can make an informed vote on this?
We can, but staff. This is,
Chair Hansen, we could either have Zach Christensen or Talia Longhurst.
well, hang on one sec. I've got our AG, Brian Quisenberry's hand raised. Brian?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In response to Vice Chair Hansen's request, I believe we're planning on discussing this in executive session later on this afternoon. It relates to litigation, and so that would be my recommendation. And we'll have staff there available to answer questions and to have this discussion there.
I'll make a motion then, Chair, to postpone the vote on this contract until after that closed session.
Can you make a motion to postpone, and then after that closed session, we can decide whether we want to bring it back or put it on another agenda? Would that be okay?
That would be fine.
I
That'd be
second
fine.
the
Just
motion.
think
Board
we
Member
need to do
Cannon.
You second the motion?
Yes.
Okay. You want to speak to the motion? Scott, or have you? Member Hanson?
I think you've heard all I need to say.
Okay, we have a motion on item 4.2 to postpone. Any discussion on the motion? I'm seeing none. A motion to postpone on, the motion before the board is on consent calendar 4.2 to postpone. Board members at this time, please vote. Voting is complete and the motion passes unanimously. Okay, 4.3 on our consent calendar. I'm sorry, was that member Earl? I should have this so simply.
I think I did it, Chair Huntsman. It is.
Belknap?
Remember Earl, I messed you up actually, so.
Okay, so who,
Remember Earl.
board member Earl? Okay,
Yeah, the question I am asking, is this an expansion of what we're already working on in that it creates regional trainings in order to implement individual competencies? Am I understanding that correctly? I don't know, is there some?
Zach Christensen on contract.
If Chief of Staff Sarah Young is available, we were working with her and she might be able to provide some additional information on this. But the original contract had in the scope that we had certain trainings that were planned to be in the contract, but due to the pandemic, we were not able to have a lot of those different trainings and the different trainings for the local district needs. And so this amendment took those trainings that were anticipated and moved them forward, and then provided additional funding to be able to focus on the personalization of the portrait of a graduate competencies that we have.
Okay.
And if-
Director Christensen, this is Sarah Young. I am here to answer any questions, Board Member Earl, in case you have them.
And do you have any?
We're expanding to regional meetings. We didn't hold some of our meetings because of COVID or they were having to be moved. Am I understanding it right? So we're doing these regional meetings to promote competencies within districts.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
And that's a change in scope. It's so as
Yeah.
it goes. Do you have a
But
follow-up?
we didn't have the regional meetings before. We were just offering those that were interested. Is that accurate?
So prior to, we had designed these to be in-person kind of collaborative development sessions that would have allowed for that professional learning. Due to COVID, we shifted all of the development work online. And so in that online space, we have some LEAs that feel they did not get the opportunity to really dive in and learn about Portrait of a Graduate and how they can apply it to their communities. So this particular amendment is specific to being able to address that LEA request to make sure that everybody across the state has access, not just those who were participating in some of that Zoom digital development work, because there was a conflict with other needs as they emerged related to COVID.
Okay, thank you.
Member Hutchings?
I would like to make a motion that the board approves the contract with Knowledge Works Foundation.
Can I state the motion to say that you approve 4.3, item 4.3 of our consent calendar?
And I second it.
Are you okay with that, Member Hutchings?
Member Booth,
Yes.
second.
You want a discussion to the motion, Member Hutchings?
I'll just say I love that we're expanding opportunities for local areas to contribute and have better development and learning about Portrait of a Graduate and how to use it.
Good. Any other discussion, further discussion to the motion? Seeing none, the motion before the board is that the board approve item 4.3 of the consent calendar. Board members at this time, please vote. Voting is complete. The motion passes with 2 no votes. No votes are member Earl and member Klein. Is that how you see it, Vice Chairs?
Correct?
Thank you.
Yes.
Motion passes. The other item on our consent calendar was 4.4. Member Moss.
Thank you, Chair. I support this, and in fact, I'll bring a motion to approve it. I hadn't had enough time or taken enough time. Maybe that's on me. There was, a fairly short period, but I was going to ask about our guidance of West Ed in reviewing current examples of Utah success in this area, which I think is a really important area. We've got things like the Roy Cohn Project and other things that have come along and done some good things in this space. So rather than ask our staff about that, I hope that will be part of the project. ULEAD has looked at some of this, and I hope they would be involved in looking at previous examples that have really done well, and then working this into that model of looking at who's doing it best. But with that basically superfluous commentary, I'll bring a motion that we approve this contract.
So do we have a second?
Second, Board Member Straight.
So is it okay with the maker of the motion that the motion before the board that you're making is to approve item 4.4 of the general consent calendar? Is that okay?
Yes, so moved.
Okay, maker of the motion. Okay, you want to speak any more to the motion?
No, thank you.
Okay, member Earl's hand is raised. Discussion.
Yeah, my question has to do with, I haven't been able to go all the way through this contract, but the question has to do with whether or not what the scope of the work is. Is it research-based? Is it professional development-based? Who are the players in this? In other words, who will be writing the content? Is it just West Ed? Are they working with our staff? Are they working through Utah laws? What is the overall scope of this? And I apologize, I just haven't been able to read it.
Okay. I believe Chief of Staff Sarah Young's probably going to speak to this, unless, well, it looks like Zach Christensen's hand is raised. Zach.
Sure. We have Tracy Vandeventer, who is over this contract, who should be able to address those questions if that's okay.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Tracy Vandeventer,
Yeah, thank you so much. Tracy Vandeventer, Director of the USBE Center for Continuous School Improvement. And in Senate Bill 184, we were directed to create a pilot, innovative opportunity to bring in community engagement into our schools. We see that there's a specific need at the middle level as we look at our TSI schools, and also looking at student success from grades 5 and 6, and then comparing that with grades 8, we notice that there's been a drop in proficiency. So this pilot program is focused on that middle level across the state. It is research-based. We will be working closely with West Ed. It will have a home visit component as the community welcomes it. It's not a requirement, but we recognize making those connections are important. But it's also embracing the idea that schools, as students move from the elementary to the middle and middle to high school, that those transitions at times can be very difficult for the students. And also often the times there are questions that families have, and we want to do our best on making sure that families feel welcome in our schools, that they have a place to go to get questions answered as they move from a single teacher to multiple classes in a day with multiple teachers, how does that change and how can we best support our students in transitioning into that area? And then as we move into the 9th grade, which are at some middle levels, trying to make sure that our families have that awareness and understanding about how that ties into the graduation requirements. So there'll be a lot of information gathering and sharing out and trying to create a space. And the last piece is trying to bring in community resources into the school that could provide resources and support for our families at those middle levels. I hope that gives you at least a little taste of where we're headed.
Member Earl?
Yeah, that I have probably some concerns around some components of that. I'm sure just because we're talking about community resources versus engagement, which is the family. And so, and with so much money that we're engaging with this, I am a little concerned about what community resources we're bringing in, maybe in place of family. So I guess I still have some questions around that, but perhaps as this rolls out, it'll clarify that.
Dr. Dixon?
And as most of you know, thank you, Chair Huntsman, as most of you know, WestEd is our regional service agency of support, just like the REISs are for the districts that they serve. So I think the pilot helps us work through some of those issues, Board Member Earl, and we'll be totally transparent as we move through the pilot. The overall arching cue for the RFP is family engagement. And I think you're spot on. That is the goal. And also, as Tracy mentioned, the TSI schools are the schools that have requirements but no support. We haven't put any resources towards them, and so this is an opportunity to see how we can support those schools that are struggling, and knowing that family engagement is one of the issues that they struggle with. So really open to some of your ideas and suggestions and how you want to help guide that pilot. It's rather than having something that is lock, stock from the get-go, being able to develop it as we go is really key here, so that it can be scaled up if districts and charters so desire. So being able to get ahead of it on the front end with your input would be great.
Okay.
What would that look like, if I can ask a question? What would that on the front end look like? Because this is creating the scope. So can someone answer that?
Yeah, so designing what the pilot would look like, and that would be done in concert with WestEd. Tracy and her colleagues would be the co-developers. So it's not like WestEd just develops it and comes in and says, here it is, but we co-develop that and give them input along the way. And I used an acronym. I try not to do that. And Tracy, it's the T is for what? School improvement. I'm blanking on the T.
Targeted
School improvement as part of our tiered support.
And Chair, if I may?
Yes, please.
Just adding another piece, that the third partner in that front end is bringing the schools to the table as well, that we are not creating anything for the schools and providing it. We're trying to create with the schools, because we recognize that each school has a unique need and community, and that we want those schools to bring in families to be part of that planning also. So we see that the three groups will be coming together to decide what would be best in trying to encourage community engagement at that building.
Thank you, Tracy. Vice Chair Belknap, your hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. Just a follow-up here. Do we have any of the verbiage available now, what they're going to be working on, or are we, like Tracy was saying, allowing them to create it? Also, where will our involvement as a board be in what is being going out and coming back in? Where will our involvement be included there?
Chair, if I may? Yep.
Please.
So right now, our plan is to look at 2 phases in our project. So the first phase is creating that partnership with WestEd and our organization and the identified school family community engagement team that will come together and go through that readiness and identify what those needs are and what the schools have recognized are areas where they feel that they could grow in involving and engaging. And then we have a phase 2 that after those schools have been identified, after some of those priorities have been identified and designated, then we will move into an area where we will be able to implement across 3 continuous improvement cycles, little chunks of time. So I see that actually there's a lot of room for us, especially as we look at that phased approach, that we could come back to the board and share what schools have chosen to be involved, which schools have selected what resources they think will really help their communities become a more important partner in their child's education, and then even within those continuous improvement cycles, providing feedback if necessary.
Chair, follow up.
Follow up.
Thank you. I'm just trying to get clarity as to we've now decided that or picked West Ed would be our best partner in here. What rubric did we use to decide they would be our best choice? And did we ever evaluate that at a board level? I don't remember hearing this.
Tracy, do you want to respond, or Superintendent?
I could start and say that within our rubric or our criteria, we ask that they provide support to schools and innovative methods to bring in families and parent engagement, and then to try to build some understanding about strategies for success at that secondary level, which might be unique for families compared to the elementary level. And then really building a scaffolded and inclusive transition program, again, looking at the difficulties from moving from elementary to middle to high school. There were certain, these components were put out there for the different vendors that applied, and within our RFP process, we reviewed that. Those specific criterias, I'm not aware came to the board prior to us rolling out the RFP.
Oh, thank you, Tracy. It went through the RFP process. Thank you.
Okay, Member Hart.
Can someone repeat what kind of needs assessment was done to make sure that this is something that we needed to dedicate resources to? And did schools have input on that needs assessment?
So we haven't actually done a needs assessment yet. That will be part of the process once schools select to participate. Instead, from USBE side, what we did is we looked at those targeted support and improvement, or TSI schools. And as we look overall at the TSI schools, and as Superintendent Dixon mentioned, they are not currently receiving any resources and support from USBE. We noticed that in that sort of layout of all of our 448 schools, the majority of schools that have multiple student groups that are in that TSI designation are at the middle level. In fact, 80% of our schools that have 5 student groups are middle school level schools. And as we've been looking at ways to try to support these schools that have high numbers of student groups there, we're trying to find ways to help build leverage and tools for them that they'd be able to elevate the performance of those student groups. One of those areas we think is community and family engagement. We know that families are such an important and crucial support in student success. So that's why we narrowed it to that middle level. So from our end, we made that decision based on targeted support and improvement list, and recognized that our middle level schools appear to be struggling the most when you look overall at all the schools that are designated at this point.
You have a follow-up?
Yeah, so I understand that part. The part I'm not understanding and perhaps I have an issue with is why is perhaps settling on parent engagement without input from the schools, or settling on an aspect of parent engagement. I feel like those schools need a say in the process, and I'm just not sure where that took place in the process.
Tracy?
Yeah, great question. So Senate Bill 184 states that we are mandated or directed to create a pilot complementary approach to school improvement that draws on community resources and engagement. So with that line, we believed it was directing us to pull in parent and family engagement and trying to increase community resources. So in that case, you're right. We were not part of that decision, but are taking our lead from Senate Bill 184, and that's on line 187 if you're interested in looking more.
Chair, just one more follow-up to that. I just want to make sure that the schools are brought into this process and have a voice very, very early on. There won't be improvements that are realized and are sustainable unless that happens. So just a note for the process.
Member Earl.
All right, I'll try to be quick. Do schools get to decide if they participate, or is this mandated if you fall under this criteria?
Nope, this is completely voluntary, and we are giving them the opportunity to choose to participate. And then also, again, in that first phase, we're actively seeking out their direction on what support they may need to bring in, again, community and family engagement, community resources, family engagement.
Okay, and my next question is, in that phase one, I didn't actually hear either community councils, which consist of a great, leaders, family leaders, or so to speak, that have choose to engage in this process. Where do you get the information to move forward? In other words, that needs that families think they need versus, a bill that got passed, right? I mean, that's nice, innovative ways to fix people's lives, but at what point do we engage with the people and ask what help they actually want or don't want in the helping of their children?
Excellent point. And so the very first step is creating a family and community engagement team that has representatives of parents. Now, whether or not the parents who are part of the community council can also be part of that family and community engagement team, we won't be able to determine that, but they are our first group that we're reaching out to. Of course, it's also opened up to all family members in the school. So there will be a team initially created to look at the what's in place and what the needs might be. Parents are an active part of that. We see that the administration and then teachers will also be part of that committee that will be reviewing that. Again, I'm not sure that we can ensure that all of those members are also part of the community council. We decided not to rely on the community council as its sole source because we wanted to expand opportunities for families to be involved. And so that's why we've created a specific focus group on family and community engagement.
Okay. And does the law spell out who's on that? Or is that something that phase one decides?
The law doesn't spell that out at all. This is part of the project's recommendations that has come forth from this RFP, that they believe this is an important first step. So this is something that we've designated as we move forward, that we know we need to get that committee together to help us decide what is the best that we can do, the supports we can provide for schools.
Okay, thank you.
And I didn't see who was next in the queue, but I'll go Member Klein.
I think Jim was first. Go ahead, Jim.
Go ahead. Maybe I could just wrap up as the maker of the motion after.
Okay. Sure. So I won't be voting on this. To me, this is not the proper role of schools.
Okay. Member Moss. We do have a motion, so go ahead.
Maybe just a final question and comment. I'm very interested to see that this takes advantage of what Utah schools are already doing. I respect West Ed, and I wonder if it's just a suggestion if Mikkel Weathers or Jessica Callan are certainly part of that. She's got a team, and so part of my question was going to be, do we need a full outside team when we have some really good people here in Utah and USB doing this? I do hope that West Ed adds a real research-based analysis and suggestions, and that like you said, it's provided by that statute. So I guess one question could be on the back end. This is a one-year funding. Will there be an opportunity, and perhaps it's ULEAD, perhaps it's our community engagement folks, to look at who does this well and how they did it, that's not necessarily part of a 1-year initial phase because you're just going to be getting it started. But can that be done in-house afterwards so we make sure we capture what actually works? In addition to looking backwards a little bit, like I said, Roy Cohn or others, there's some good examples already doing this. I just want to make sure we capture Utah excellence that's already happened and then channel that internally as we roll forward. Is that part of the plan?
Tracy?
Absolutely. And what we're hoping is to look at not only what benefits are happening, we've been asked and directed to make a comparison with other school improvement initiatives to see how this pilot might actually have a positive impact. And you're absolutely right. It's a short term, 18 months. So it's not enough time for us to really see immediate rise impact perhaps, but we're going to be looking at other ways to also measure engagement. You know, how can we improve and how much do we see families participating in parent and family, meetings, and how do we see attendance improving, and how about behaviors, or just, doing surveys to kind of sense, is there a higher level of welcome that families might feel? So we are recognizing that we have limited aspects, looking at some of the actual RISE data, but we're trying to layer that out so that we can see improvement across many scopes that we know are crucial for student success.
Thank you. And I support empowering parents. I think if done right, this can do that. They're the best partner and support and driver of education. So I hope this, and I supported the expenditure of ESSER funds on the family engagement program through Jessica Callan's section, and I hope that's also integrated here. These are, coming at it from a couple of different ways. We're putting a lot of money in this, and so I do hope it empowers parents and helps them to be more engaged and allowed to sort of have a voice in what they need for their kids, and then support it and show up and have a welcome there from the school, as you indicate. I think that's the way to go. So thank you.
Member Booth?
Chair, I'm just wondering if I could just ask a question of Board Member Klein. I'm just trying to understand all sides of this issue, and her last comment that she didn't feel this was the role of schools. I'm just wondering what she's referring to.
Well, normally you can ask, usually your questions are addressed to the chair. And then if Member Klein wants a comment, but we usually
all right,
get into that. So you can ask the question of what would be the concerns on what you can ask, what the concern that was previously stated and other comments might be, or something of that nature. And then we see if there's a response, but we normally don't get into the.
Okay. I would love to know what the concern would be if there is some additional information that could help enlighten this discussion.
Regarding
why what is being proposed in this motion is not the role of schools.
So you're seeking to find out how it is that how this is not a role of schools, and
right.
Does anyone speak to that? And so if somebody wanted to raise their hand and speak to it, but you might not get an answer. So,
okay.
Member Earl?
Yeah, we're working backwards, I guess, is the thing, where instead of parents asking for the services, we're telling them what services they need. So it's a backwards motion. We've done this kind of thing for years where we bring in a pilot program and it's going to increase test results or outcomes. So, maybe it will, maybe it won't. I think we've got a lot of history that says, that sometimes when you work backwards instead of forwards with parents, and hopefully that's what comes of this. So anyways, those are just a couple thoughts I had. But
okay. I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so I'm going to call this to a vote. The motion before the board is that the board approve item 4.4 of the consent calendar. Board members at this time, please vote. Okay. The motion passes with 4 no votes. No votes, Member Klein, Member Belknap, Member Earl, Member Hart. Is that how you see it?
Yes, and Board Member Lear is here. I don't know if I've missed any of her other votes.
No, you haven't. Thank you.
Welcome, Member Lear. The motion passes. This concludes our general consent calendar, and we will do better making sure that this is out. And I invite board members, if you don't see something, please fly the SOS immediately, so we can make sure that we get things before you in a timely manner. So thank you.